former acting ICE director. Tom, thanks for being here this morning. So your reaction to the current, it almost feels like a stalemate at the border. They've taken some of the migrants from the stadium. They're moving them to a more sanitary government shelter. How do you see things playing out? Is Mexico doing their part on that side of the border?
Well, first of all, the spokesman of Puebla Sin La Frontera, he needs to be reminded that aiding and abetting illegal entry in the United States is a felony. So I hope the investigative agencies are looking at that whole organization, their leadership. But look, the new president coming to Mexico, he's got to do the right thing, you know, for our country and for his country. This whole caravan that's causing havoc on his northern border in Tijuana could have been avoided if Mexico would have stepped up and did what they should have done on their southern border. Now, I think they tried, but I don't think they put enough effort into it. You can't tell me the caravan members were able to push through Mexican military, Mexican federal police that easily. So, again, I think he needs to take a hard stance in this. If he doesn't, you're going to see more caravans coming up through Mexico. He has to control his southern border.
Tom, it's our understanding that part of the apprehension or discovery of these criminals amongst the caravan is in part due to the really thorough work by the Border Patrol and in part from the interviews, from the information that he willingly gave. Can you speak to what would happen if they weren't forthcoming and if you didn't have papers on him that related to his prior prison sentence? What happens then?
Well, we verified there were 500 criminals in this first caravan, and I'm not going to discuss how they came up with that data because I think it's law enforcement sensitive, law enforcement technique. But I can guarantee you, because I know how they're doing it, we've done it in the past. There's solid information that we're getting from within the caravan, based on a lot of information, biometric, biographic. So look, regardless if they want to come forward or not in their criminal history, we're going to find a lot of it out through our other methods. So if we've already verified over 500, and this isn't talking about the hundreds more that we can't verify. There's a suspicion, but we haven't yet to verify it to be able to say absolutely the criminals. There's more than 500. Yeah. Just 500 that we can verify.
Tom, that seems like some vindication for the president, who was warning about that very fact, and you had various reporters who shall go unnamed and others in the Democratic Party saying, oh, there's no criminals and this is not an invasion and all the rest. So you can react to that, but I also want to ask you about the Homeland Security Department asking the Pentagon to extend the border deployment through at least January. I want to add some skepticism. There are a lot of critics in Congress saying this is pretty expensive for American taxpayers. Can you explain what our men and women in uniform, what they're doing, and whether it really is worth the taxpayer money?
Of course. First of all, President Trump has been right 100% of the time when it comes to border security. Everything he has done on the border makes sense from the perspective of law enforcement, from the perspective of the rule of law and the sovereignty of this country. And as a 34-career law enforcement officer who's done this for years, including the Border Patrol, he has been 100% accurate. And the Democrats don't like that. They hate it. But as far as his move to send DOD to the border, that was a genius move. Because not only does he control the illegal entry of this caravan and protect the sovereignty of this country, but by doing that, by sending DOD to the border, he is infuriating the drug cartels. And I've said for years, illegal immigration bankrolls drug cartels because you got to pay them a fee to work through the plazas. So when he sends DOD down, there's more border agents on the border, DOD's on board, there's more people at the port of entry. The cartels can't freely move their product like they usually do. And that's why the cartels are getting frustrated, and that's why you're seeing them starting to get upset with this president and DOD, and they're upset with Mexico.
Well, stopping them from poisoning our children is obviously a big priority of this president. We appreciate you pointing that out. Thanks for coming in, Tom.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate having me. Thank you.
Talks are expected to focus on solving the migrant crisis at the southern border. The news comes as officials in Tijuana shut down an overcrowded shelter over unsanitary conditions.
All right, let's bring in Carla Provost. She's at the U.S. Border Patrol on a daily basis. She's the chief there. Are you optimistic that this talks with Mexico will help your job get easier?
Well, it's certainly something that we want to go well. As always, we work closely with the government of Mexico, and we want to ensure that we do that moving forward, especially in dealing with this caravan crisis.
But especially when you see the weak way in which they handled their southern border, it set up the problems we're having at our southern border. Are they ever going to get serious about controlling their southern border?
We work with them closely when it comes to both their northern border and the southern border. They have been working diligently throughout when it comes to this caravan and trying to deal with the situation, I think, as best they can in Mexico.
Really?
Carla, you're down there. You know exactly what's going on. If you had a message for the president, what needs to be done? If you could fix this, what would you send? What message would you send to him or to Congress?
Well, definitely we need more wall. We need more manpower. We need Congress to fix the loopholes in the laws. Until those loopholes are fixed, this situation is not... Well, in particular with the family units and the ability to come to this country and be released into the United States while awaiting a court date that is long down the road. We need Congress to act and deal with the immigration laws and see if they can fix that situation for us. Otherwise, the pull factor is going to continue to be there, and these individuals are going to keep coming.
All right. Chief, give us an update on what's going on with the caravan. We know they had been in one particular stadium, but the conditions were dreadful there. They've moved them about 10 miles further away, I think, from the border. What is the status?
Yes, that is correct. They have moved him to another shelter. This is part of the challenges that the government of Mexico is having to deal with this large of a number of individuals. Right now, there's approximately 7,400 caravan members in the Tijuana area. And as you stated, the one shelter was closed down. They have opened up another one, and they are trying to find placement for others as we continue to work with the government of Mexico to try to get these individuals to present themselves at the port of entry for inspection.
Chief, the president's all ears when it comes to the issues that you have in doing your job and the problems you're having. So therefore, would you support, and do your cohorts support the president making a stand to get the $5 billion to continue the quest to get a legitimate barrier on the southern border? Would you be for that?
Definitely. We need that barrier. I think last weekend's example in San Diego with the old barrier not holding up, that's a prime example of why we need this barrier, and the president has been supporting us from day one with that requirement.
Okay. Well, she is the chief of the U.S. Border Patrol, Carla Provost. Thank you very much for joining us live.
Thanks for having me.
Border agents arrest an MS-13 gang member traveling apparently with one of the migrant caravans as the Department of Homeland Security warns this problem will only get worse.
Rodney Scott is the chief patrol agent at the San Diego sector, U.S. Border Patrol. He joins us now with the latest. Rodney, I'm watching last night and I'm seeing that the wall's been effective really since Sunday as a deterrent. But it turns out there's a whole group going around the wall. How far do they have to travel to get around that barrier?
So that's a great question. Again, thank you for having me on this morning. We're in the process here in San Diego of upgrading a legacy dilapidated scrap metal fence with a new border wall, but that project is ongoing. So currently, within a couple hundred yards of the San Ysidro port of entry going to the east, we have that old fence that's only a few feet high. Then we have about 9 miles of the new border wall completed. And then again, less than 14 miles away from the beach, we have no fencing whatsoever.
Unbelievable. It's inexcusable.
Let's talk a little bit about this member who he identified himself as, I used to be an MS-13. 29-year-old Jose Villalobos Jobel, apparently from Honduras. He was caught over in Calexico area, El Centro sector. Was he part of the caravan in Tijuana and just went out that way, or from one of the other caravans?
No, it's hard to say, to be quite honest. One of the best ways we identify the caravan members is by their own admission. We do work with the government of Mexico and a lot of NGOs to try to get more evidence behind that, but for the most part, it's based on their own statements.
Okay, we know.
My belief. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So let's talk about some of the troops that are down there, because the president says he might extend deployment for thousands of active duty troops. We were told they were going to be able to go home for Christmas, and he says if the problem still exists there, because some of these migrant workers say they're going to be there for months because they can't get asylum or can't be processed that quickly to get through to the United States. He says that he might have to keep the troops down there till January. Can you elaborate on this?
So I can't really speak to the negotiations between DOD and DHS. My job as the chief here is to outline my requirements. The situation here is actually worse than it was last Sunday. Another 1,200 migrants have showed up in Tijuana. We've also started to get into our rainy season. It's actually raining right now in San Diego, which is fairly rare, and it's starting to cool off. So we're going to monitor the situation daily, and I'll push my requirements up to Washington, D.C. and let them negotiate that.
So we know they said there's about 600 criminals within these caravans, and then we find out one of them is MS-13. What do your reconnaissance tell you about who else might be in there?
So I want to highlight the 600 criminals as well. There's a lot of law enforcement techniques on how we figure that out, but those are primarily people that have been in the United States in the past, and we've been able to get some kind of a criminal history on them. Getting criminal history on individuals in other countries is quite difficult, and also it's by admission. So we had the MS-13 member you mentioned. There's another 18th Street gang member, self-professed, claims to have murdered somebody and been in prison before, but tracking down those records is difficult.
Yeah. Chief, over the weekend, of course, that's when hundreds of migrants ran toward the U.S. border. A number of them threw projectiles or rocks at the agents, the Border Patrol agents there. What's the reaction to the agents there in your sector about perhaps another encounter like that?
So we're preparing accordingly. We watched this migrant caravan, which is different than any other just by volume and the propensity for violence. We watched them violently push across 2 international borders and come up through Mexico. So we did significant intel briefings with our personnel and made sure that we were ready with the right equipment. And then we're basing off of Sunday. We've made some adjustments to our enforcement, and we're going to be ready if it comes back again.
Okay. All right.
Do you mind if I ask what adjustments? Can you talk about that you've made?
I won't get into the specifics, but in every incident like this, we do a quick after-action review. We've identified some vulnerabilities in the border that the Department of Defense is helping us mitigate currently, as I speak, actually. We've also looked at our deployment methods and the hot spots. Working with our partners in Mexico, we're trying to make sure we have Mexican police pre-deployed in some of our more vulnerable areas. You saw their Tijuana River channel where there's really no border barrier at all. That's one of the areas that we're trying to make sure that we have a 24/7 presence.
Sure.
And then we also have 24-hour surveillance, aerial surveillance over the area now, so we can see any movement of personnel.
You're basically saying, hey, you'll do the best job you possibly can, but it would certainly help to have some type of physical barrier there to aid you in your effort, and Congress just can't get their act together. Rodney Scott, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.